And happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm trying to mute my other screen here. How's everybody doing?
Great.
There's always something with this thing, you know.
I understand, Paul.
Totally. How are you doing? Happy Wednesday to you. I'm doing good.
Happy Wednesday to you.
Happy 2 weeks before Thanksgiving? 3 weeks before? 3 weeks before Thanksgiving.
3 weeks, I think, before Thanksgiving. Yeah.
No, a month, because Thanksgiving's on the 27th.
It's still October, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Happy Halloween early, everybody.
Yeah,
you can see I've been joined by my friends here for this week, and
I see
these guys
that
over here. So yeah, actually they kind of look like black-eyed kids on the other side.
They do. They have black eyes.
Yeah.
Are they twins?
Black-eyed kids with. No. Well, the one doesn't have a good tan. And,
no, a little pale there. I see.
Yeah, and she's got a neat little doll that she has with her, but.
Ew.
Yeah, they don't go outside until Halloween night. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you take them out if it rains?
No. I got rid of the alien guy. What alien guy did I have?
I don't know.
Remember what alien guy I had. Well, I don't know. So you guys don't have a show Friday, do you?
No. So actually, we are not doing any more Friday night shows at all.
Okay.
Just life, and we have things going on weekends, and I just I want my weekends free again, and so does Brandy. So we're going to do our shows through the week, and I'll hop on with BMR on Saturday nights when I'm around and I can. But other than that, nope.
And it's really kind of nice. Not that I didn't love doing my show on Saturday nights, but it's kind of nice moving it to Wednesdays and having Saturdays free to do ghost hunts or get in the woods or do whatever. So this is kind of nice.
It's really nice, because whenever we've been doing shows, Friday night shows for 4 years now, and that was okay when I didn't have a life, but now I'm kind of getting a life again, and and the girls, they keep me busy, and
So
but
anyway,
days.
Keep your notifications on for Friday night. I'm not going to do a live, but I'm going to record something. I'm off tomorrow. I might record some stories and stuff and do a little Halloween ghost story night or something like that. So we'll see. Oh, Bigfoot. You are my.
Oh, thank you.
Very sweet. So, hey, we got a fun show tonight. We have Dr. Dean Bertram backstage, just waiting to come out and talk all things weird. So he'll be up here in just a few seconds. Remind everybody that Super Chat, as BMR always says, Super Chat is open. If you feel the need, no pressure to do so. If you feel like sending some bucks, that's great. If not, that's fine too. I just appreciate having everybody in here. As you know, everything just goes right back into the show, and that's how we get to conferences and get to have some fun stuff and do ghost hunting and get some cool equipment and do it.
Turn this down. Sorry.
Oh,
I was putting the show on. I was putting the show on and on my phone, so I could. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, Jenny. Hey, little Patty. Hey, Randy. Daryl's here. Ristel's here. Gary. Bigfoot Fedez. I know I'm saying that last name wrong. Jojo from Australia. Fedez. Jojo from Australia. Mickey G.
Oh, yeah.
Paula UU. Hey, Paula. Joanne. Every time I meet a Paula, I don't know if you remember that song, Hey Paul, Hey Paula. It's a really old song.
I do not remember that song.
Okay. It's older than we are. And I always say, Hey Paula, or Hey Paula, and every time nobody really ever gets it. So Jilly's here too. So anyway, hi Mr. G. All right, so let's bring Dr. Dean on up here. Good evening, kind sir.
It's so good to see you, Paul and Krista, again. I've missed you since Crossing Realms conference.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you did a fantastic job speaking, and we definitely appreciate you coming and doing that for us.
Fun. I really was grateful to be invited. It was a blast to get to hang out with you
I
guys.
was just sad I didn't get to spend more time with you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That happens at conferences, though. You know, they get so busy, particularly if you're organizing them like you guys are. Like I run a couple film festivals, and I socialize as much as I possibly can, but you also have to run around doing the organizing.
Right.
So you got to balance all these, balls in the air and try to, make everybody happy.
Absolutely.
You guys did a great job for the first year con. It was amazing. Had such a great time. So did my girlfriend Sam, who came. We both really loved it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it was great meeting you. It was great meeting a lot of the people that we saw we see in chat, and everybody that we have guests that we have on here. It's just so neat to be able to shake hands or get a little hug in or something like that to actually physically meet somebody. So that's always pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've considered Jason McLean one of my best friends for years now, because we used to do a show together on the Untold Radio Network.
So you're the one.
Weird. Yeah. And he was. I used to do a weird, because I'd been doing Talking Weird for a while. And Untold Radio were kind enough to ask me to move my show to their network. Doug Hychek was actually, and I'd started this other weird little video show, which was just me talking about strange books, called My Weird Library, which was just me doing a straight to camera. And Doug said, "We like that show too, but it has to be you and a co-host. It can't just be you booking the camera." And he said, "Who do you want?" And I went, "Jason McLean," because I had Jason on my show. I was aware of Jason's work. Jason's so knowledgeable and so switched on. And so I think he had so many podcasts going on, though. He seemed to be on the air back then every night of the week. So he kind of stepped back from podcasting for a while. So I didn't want to do the show without him. So we ran it for a year, and that was it. Mysterious Library. But that was such a great show. And it was wonderful. So it was wonderful to meet Jason in person at Crossing Realms. And Donnie Cho, and Bigfoot Michigan Rob and Tex and all these people I'd known for years. It was all wonderful.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a good time overall, And we raised quite a bit of money for the museum, so that's what counts. So we appreciate that.
And what a fantastic museum that is too. I give Kathy all kinds of trouble all the time that the St. Louis History Museum here is my favorite museum, but I only say that when she's picking on me. But that place is top notch. Yeah. I love Kathy's awesome. The museum is my favorite one. So
absolutely.
So, but anyway, Dr. Dean, thank you so much for spending your Wednesday night here with us. We certainly do appreciate you coming on.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So you're saying that you do a lot of film festivals. Let's kind of kick things off with that. How did you get into doing all these films?
Well, it's funny. I never set out to be somebody who ran film festivals. I have an academic background. I have a PhD, and obviously before that a master's and a bachelor's degree. And while they weren't in film, I always loved film. So throughout those degrees, I was always fooling around in film. And towards the end of my PhD, I happened to make a short horror film in Australia with my girlfriend at the time, and with her brother was involved and my brother were involved. And we submitted it to festivals overseas, including one in Wisconsin, which is where I live now, funnily enough. And it screened at a number of overseas festivals. But when I lived in Sydney, Australia, there was no horror festival in Australia. There just wasn't one. And at the time, the Australian art scene and the film scene just weren't friendly to horror. It's got a little bit better since then, but back then they really weren't friendly to horror. And we thought, this was just a short film. We thought there's got to be another, dozen so people in Australia who want to have their short film screened at a festival. So let's just start a festival, not really knowing what we were doing. None of us had a background in running festivals. We went and we visited other film festivals and watched how they kind of did it to get an idea. And this is some 20 years ago, almost now. And then so we launched a little festival and we called it a Night of Horror International Film. It was just called a Night of Horror Short Film Festival then, because we planned on just having our film sneakily and, a dozen or so other films in one night in one venue. But then when we opened submissions, back then there was a submission server where people could enter their films called Without a Box. That's folded now. There's another film festival submission platform called Film Freeway, which dominated Without a Box and kind of took over the space. But back then, Without a Box, which I think became an Amazon subsidiary and was connected to IMDb, that's how we just opened submissions on that platform. You had to jump through a lot of hoops to start a festival in those days. Now it's very easy to start a festival Film Freeway. But we jumped through the hoops and we were able to start a festival to get submissions coming in. And we were flooded, what we thought was flooded with submissions, which really is nowhere near the number I get now. I get so many more these days. But we got 180 something submissions in that first year. And we felt really disingenuous. And from all over the world, we just thought it would be Sydney people submitting and Australians maybe, but from all over the world. And because we were filmmakers ourselves and we knew what it felt like to not be accepted into festivals and how exciting it was when you were accepted into festivals, we felt kind of disingenuous just doing a little 12 film program. So even that first year, although we called it a night of horror, it was actually 3 nights of horror. Well, 2 days and 1 night of horror. We stretched it out and we played, I don't know, probably, I can't remember how many, maybe 80 films or 50 films or something. And then the next year we opened to feature films as well. And so it kind of grew from there. And this was back in, I think, 2006 we started a night of horror in Sydney. So that's and I just kind of fell into it. You know, I was somebody who always loved film. I was somebody who loved making my own kind of crappy little films, although I hope these days they've gotten a little bit better. But so I kind of just by default became a film festival director, and I've stayed in that space professionally since then. Like that's my living now, is running film festivals.
Wow. Fantastic. Nice. How did you end up in the States?
I actually married. I always loved America anyway. My dad used to live in America. He immigrated here, and he's passed now. But he married a lady here, and they lived in Texas together for a long time. So I visited him. My PhD dissertation was on American UFO belief, so I came then. Even as a kid, my parents always used to come to America. My dad had a lot of business then when he was married to my mother. So we visited America a lot. So I always loved it. And then I eventually met an American girl and we got married. And so I'm since divorced, but I moved here because we got married, and that's how I ended up here.
Very good.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice. What was your first film? Do you remember where the inspiration for it came from?
Yeah, it's funny. You guys might laugh when I tell you my first film. The inspiration, I think, was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not that it was a totally a Raiders ripoff, but my brother and I were massive fans of Raiders. And there was a documentary. I remember it still very, very clearly. There were a couple of documentaries on the making, and there was one documentary on TV, which I think we recorded on Betamax, which is what we had back then.
Betamax, yeah, I remember that.
Oh, I remember those days.
And it was on the stunts it was how they did the stunt work for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Because Raiders of the Lost Ark is a stunt-intensive movie. You know, Indy's fighting on top of the truck and ducking, airplane, propeller blades and, swinging across chasms and running with balls chasing him. Or boulders, maybe I shouldn't say boulders, but it was a film we really loved the making of it. So both my brother and I, we were already fooling around with my dad's old 8mm camera. I think it wasn't even Super 8. I think he had an 8mm. And then one Christmas, we both got very simple filmmaking or film kits, and this is back when Super 8 was still a thing. We both got a Super 8 camera and a Super 8 kind of projector that didn't project but played the film on a little TV screen. I think Agfa was the brand, and the cameras were so simple. There was literally, it must have had it obviously had a very broad depth of field, so the lens was super wide, and you couldn't even focus the thing. You just could literally start recording, and then you could stop the recording. And we made a movie called The Revenge of Joey Barbagello, and it was a film where a kid who was our neighbor, who played Joey Barbagello, it doesn't even make any sense, the movie now, but there was all these fights with kids in the bush, or the forest, as you'd call it in America. We lived in the bush, and all these stunts of I remember us tricking my stepfather, because he had a meat delivery business or a butcher delivery business, and he had a big kind of truck with like a rolling door on the back of it, but it was more kind of like a pickup with a kind of box truck thing on the back with a rolling door. And we just said, could you just drive up the driveway slowly and then kind of go faster? So he did, and he didn't know, but we were let little kids running and jumping into the back of his truck while it was taking off, and we were throwing darts at each other and filming close-ups of like darts hitting trees. It was so stupid, but again, we were like, I don't know how old we were like little kids, right, when we were making this movie. So that was our very first movie on Super 8, and it was ridiculous, but it was because we wanted to do stunty kind of things, because the Raiders film and then the documentary influenced so much, so we wanted to have dangerous things things on screen, I guess. So that was the first. Yeah, we were kids.
Super 8. I remember those days. Wow. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's really cool. And let's kind of talk about your dissertation that you mentioned earlier, Flying Saucer Culture, a historical survey on American UFO beliefs. So you had interest in this subject from a young age.
Yeah, I did. There's a long story and a short story. I was a kid who I suppose was raised, again, obviously I've given my age because I saw Raiders at the cinema, but at that period in time in the 70s and into the 80s, there was a kind of almost an occult culture and a UFO culture. So David Bowie was singing about, aliens, and Styx was singing about aliens, and the Carpenters were singing about aliens, and there was In Search Of was on television, and I went to see Chariots of the Gods with my mother at a cinema screening. You know what I mean? So it was very much a part of the cultural milieu I grew up in. This interesting kind of aliens, Close Encounters, of course, not to mention E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So it had always been a part of not just my culture, but I think everybody who grew up at that time. And now we're so swamped in those ideas anyway. But there was a period where all this stuff was fresh and kind of newish, and it seemed to be becoming culturally dominant or something. And I grew up in that kind of period. That said, I had put away all of that stuff. I mean, as you get into high school and you're interested in girls and you're interested in other things, and I didn't really carry the interest in UFOs forward with me that I had when I was a kid. I still was vaguely interested in paranormal and occultish things, but no more than I was interested in Marvel comic books or Sherlock Holmes novels or other vaguely geeky things, But after I finished high school, I did my bachelor's degree. It had nothing to do with the paranormal, nothing to do with UFOs, nothing to do with ghosts. And then when I finished my BA, I mean, a BA doesn't really qualify you to do anything. You do it because you want to, and maybe if you tacked on teaching onto it or something, you could be a teacher or something. But I think I'm not dismissing the value of education, but doesn't really give you anything. So I finished that, and I grew up in the 80s, so I love shows like Magnum PI and Simon and Simon, and Moonlighting was my favorite television show. So I wanted to be a private investigator. My dad happened to work in an office complex where a private investigator was across, the hallway, and he said, I'll introduce you to him if you want to. So I got introduced to this guy who ran an ex-cop in Sydney who ran a PI business, and then I went and I guess quasi-interned for him. I think they trained me up and didn't pay me for the first 3 months or something, but then when I'd done that, I could get licensed and I could subcontract to them. So I became a private investigator. But it sounds far more exciting than it was. 90% of my work was just surveillance. So I was always a reader anyway, but I wanted stuff to read always. When I was sitting in a car, read a line, look up, read a line, look up. And I was shopping in a bookstore in the northern suburbs of Sydney, and I picked up this book called Encounters by Edith Fiore, a psychologist. And the book was about alien abduction. And this book would have been one of those books that came out after Bud Hopkins books rather, like Missing Time and Intruders, and after, of course, Whitley Strieber's Communion. Shortly after that, it was a book which I think came out in the late 80s, riding that crest of the interest in UFO abduction or alien abduction. And I don't know why I was drawn to the book, and I read it, and the book really bothered me, like at a very deep existential level. Edith Fiore clearly, as somebody working in the mental health profession in psychology, clearly understood how to, zone in on what people believed and what people thought and psychological experiences. And unlike most books, the book begins with, you should keep a pencil next to you, and if anything in this book makes your heart race or bothers you, if anything seems familiar, you might be an alien abductee. And so when I was reading this book at an impressionable age in my early 20s, just after I'd finished my bachelor's degree and had started working this PI job, I was reading it, and it brought something to my mind which I had never thought of as alien abduction. It had never occurred to me that it was alien abduction, but it was a memory from my childhood, a series of memories which had bothered me for a very long time. And when I was young, I'd say around 5 years old, I had a series of, you could call them bedroom visitations, or you could call them dreams, or you could call them all kinds of things. And I've usually thought of it as my young mind was trying to process something. But the shorthand of it in my mind was always a little man came and took me away. And it's a very real memory from that period in my life. Again, could it have been, it was either a repeating dream cycle, or it was something strange. I tend to have it. We can talk a little bit about some of, I think, different ways to interpret the paranormal, but it was something that had always stayed with me, even though I hadn't thought about it a lot. And reading Edith Fiore's book, I all of a sudden went, I might be an alien abductee. So while I hadn't thought about UFOs properly since I was, a kid raised on ET and Close Encounters and In Search of Chariots of the Gods, that made me go down this rabbit hole of, then I read everything I could. And this was between my BA, when I hadn't done anything UFO-y, and my master's, where I started doing work in UFO belief again. To contextualize, I don't think I was abducted by grey aliens. My memories, while it was a little man, it didn't look anything like a grey. It looked perhaps more like something out of fairy faith, or more like something out of like a Todd Browning movie, like Freaks, the little dwarf people in Freaks, or the people in the Lollipop Guild. I think they were called the Doll Family, some of the most famous performers. He was very stunted. He was child-sized, but he was thick, this little man who came to take me away, like built solidly. And I remember I was always terrified by the little man. And I mean, there's a whole story there, but that's basically, to answer your question, what kind of, led me to doing my PhD work eventually. Once I realized there was something here that was interesting at a sociological and historical, and I guess psychological level, I kind of dropped into I went, oh well, I'll go back to university and I'll write on UFOs, I guess, because I'd already spent so much time obsessing over it now that book had triggered these kind of memories from my past. So that kind of led me to do my master's. And then after I did my master's, I'm like, it's still like I have my BA. It's not really worth anything. I'm just a rabble rouser with a BA, with a master's now, instead of a rabble rouser with a BA. So then I thought I'll move forward into my PhD in the same space on UFO belief. So that's what I did.
Cool. Real quick thank you to T-Bone for gifting the memberships, and for Werewolf. Good to see you for the $2
Can I say something real quick to T-Bone?
Absolutely.
Hey, T-Bone, I got your message. I haven't had time to reply back to you, but my fault. For the conference, I had $178 worth of flyers for everybody to sign, and I forgot them at home. That is my bad. So T-Bone, if you would email me at blondesandbooze@gmail.com, I will send you a Bigfoot and a Dogman that I have.
And go Blue Jays.
There you go.
Yeah. So that, that's pretty awesome. That something that could have happened in a dream or whatever triggered so much for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very strange.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you ever figure out what that was? Just a dream? Or
well, there's things about it which is super strange. Like I think I told you, my shorthand was always that the little man took me away. Like the little man would come and I would go with him. I only have, against my will, I never wanted to go with him, but I only have one recollection of where I went. I know it happened multiple times, but I only have one recollection of me going somewhere with the little man. And it wasn't like I got tractor beamed, up in a beam of light, or I got floated through my window. We were in, I guess, the relatively dark space in my bedroom. And then we were in this other space, and the space was much better lit than compared to, I guess, the darkness in my bedroom as a child. And again, this is a long time ago now. This is over 40 years ago. So memory is a funny thing, but I've always seemed to, at least as I can remember now, I've always remembered it like this. It seemed to be a high space, like a well, evenly lit, dome-ish space maybe, with lots of other beings, I'll say, who weren't the little man, who were much taller than the little man and taller than me, standing around us. And why I remember this one so clearly, which is the only time I remember where he took me, is I remember thinking the thing standing next to me, the person or the being standing next to me, was my mother. And I remember tugging on its legs very clearly, tugging on its legs. And I guess that's because as a child, you tug on your parents' legs, like you're out. And I mean, I have a 9-year-old now, but when she was little, she was always, trying to get my attention if we were with other people or we were in the shopping center or something. You kind of pull on your parents' coat, or you pull on their skirt, or you pull on their legs, mama, papa, whatever, here I am. And I remember doing that, thinking it was my mother, because I was probably used to being, my mother was probably the person I was most used to being next to at that stage of my life, who was much bigger than me. And then I remember the thing leaning down. And it wasn't my mother. Its head was like, a foot or less from me. And it wasn't anything human. And it wasn't anything, it was terrifying. And I don't like to try to say what it looked like, because I remember what the little man looked like, I think, so clearly, because I have so many memories of being taken by him. But I only remember being in this space and seeing anything like this once. And it wasn't a gray extraterrestrial any more than the little man was a gray extraterrestrial, but it also wasn't human. And it was very, very scary.
Wow.
Now that just to finish that story, that to kind of wrap it up, the denouement to the story is that one night after, I don't know how long this lasted, if it lasted for a year or if it lasted for 3 months or if it lasted for 6 months, but I know it lasted for a serious period of time as a little kid, right? And 3 months is a serious period of time when you're a little kid. 6 months is a really serious period of time, and a year's forever, but it lasted for a real amount of time. And I remember being in my bed really scared, knowing the little man was coming. I get the feeling when I knew the little man was coming. And I was scared because I knew if I went with the little man this time, I knew I was never coming back. Some part of me said, if you go with him this time, that's it. You're never, ever, ever coming back, which made me more scared. Sure enough, the little man came. And then I didn't want to go with him. I resisted. I don't think I ever resisted before physically. And I fought the little man. I didn't fight him like Rocky, like, blows upside the head like fisticuffs. But I remember, and this is the weirdest part of the whole memory for me, this whole little man story. I remember the physicality of wrestling, struggling with the little man on top of my bed. I remember it really clearly. The same way, ironically, I remember physical altercations with other little boys at that time. Like, when you're a kid, you wrestle with boys. I have very clear memories of fighting with other little boys. That's what little boys do. They fight, and it's the same kind of memory, a very physical, very real memory. And whether I beat the little man, whatever, or came to some kind of impasse, the little man couldn't take me, and he left, and he never came back. And that was the end of my experiences with the little man. That was it. Never came back. And maybe that was my psyche working through something. Maybe I had to work out how to beat my fears in some psychological capacity. Maybe it was something physical. Maybe it was something in between. I don't know. But that's pretty much all. That's the overview of the little man story. There's not much more there than that in my memory.
So did you have any like marks or anything on you, or anything
not that
like that?
Not that I can remember. Not that I can remember. No.
Wow.
Did this happen in Sydney, or was that here
Sydney.
in the state? Okay.
Yeah, it was in the suburbs, in the northern suburbs of Sydney, where my childhood home was, where I lived for the first 18 or so years of my life.
And you mentioned that you would get the feeling that it was coming back when it was about to come back. Can you explain what that feeling was?
Well, to be honest, it's so long ago now. Again, it's over 4 decades ago. I just remember, and I think when I looked into it at first, I thought, well, this might be night terrors, because I've read a lot about night terrors. There's some great academic work on sleep paralysis and night terrors and things like that. I don't think it was sleep paralysis. Ironically, I also had sleep paralysis while I was a child, which was very different. I remember sleep paralysis later in my life, occurrences of sleep paralysis, still as somebody who, wasn't an adult yet. I remember real sleep paralysis, and I remember what that felt like. This didn't feel like that. It wasn't. But there was a similar terror, perhaps, to sleep paralysis. Like there was a genuine overwhelming fear, and then this little man would be there. It was just terrifying. It was just this awareness that it was coming, and being really, really wound up and really, really scared. And I think probably the commonality with sleep paralysis is I think I felt helpless and I couldn't do anything. That was probably that commonality.
Wow.
Well, when you had that feeling, were you awake or do you think you were asleep when you had that feeling?
That's something I've asked myself 100 times. I really don't know. I'm there's a part of me which is comfortable to say, and it would be far better to say, well, it was just a dream. It was just something my childhood psyche was dealing with, and the imaginal is much closer to us, when we're children. We haven't really comprehended reality, or maybe we do comprehend it better. Maybe it's us now who don't really comprehend it.
Right.
But I don't know. It's hard when I look back now on that memory, which is so old. I never told the story till somewhat recently. I never told it to anybody until I started doing Talking Weird, which I think was about 5 years ago. I can't even remember how it came up. I can't remember if I was on Talking Weird or if I was on somebody else's show because of Talking Weird. Because I had even when I did my PhD in UFO belief, I never operated in the paranormal space. I don't really even think I'm a member of the paranormal community as much as I have friends in the space like you guys. I've always been more of an historian or an anthropologist or somebody operating outside, sympathetic to the ideas within it. But for whatever reason, somebody asked me at one time, what experience have you had? And I was like, well, it's funny you should ask. And after I said it, after I felt comfortable saying it the first time, I felt more comfortable saying it since. But I never talked to anybody about it. It wasn't something I talked to my friends about, or girlfriends about, or anybody. It wasn't something that ever came up prior to about 4 or 5 years.
Wow,
incredible.
I had a situation like that one time. I don't know if it was sleep paralysis or not. I don't know if I was dreaming or not, but I remember like a door opening and no one else was in the house, and my cats were kind of just acting a little weird. And I remember just sitting straight up and not really knowing what was going on. And I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember seeing anything. I don't know if that's, kind of similar to your situation or not. I mean, just basically not knowing what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's, and this is totally subjective now. I mean, we all pretend that, well, not all of us, but in this space, everybody likes to think they have a handle on it and they understand what things are. I don't think anybody is an expert in this space because it's all so subjective. But I do think I think we do sometimes. One of my opinions, take that for what it's worth, is that there is this other kind of space between us and between, whether you want to call it dreaming or whether you want to call it made up or whether you want to call it the complete spiritual world, whatever your idea is. I think sometimes we enter this place where we're not entirely in this world, we're not entirely in the other world, and the interactions seem highly strange. And sometimes it can be just like you said, just not sure what happened. I've had other experiences like that where I'm just not sure what happened, or it can be weird, like there's a little man at the end of your bed, So there's these places in between, I think.
Yeah. How common do you think that, you always hear about the grays and the aliens are walking among us? How common do you think that is? Do you think, we pass people all the time, or do you feel that it's, not so common, that they're rare?
I think a lot of it's cultural expectation today. So I wonder if I had those experiences with a little man later in life, or if I'd had those experiences even after I'd seen Close Encounters and E.T. the Extraterrestrial, if I wouldn't have contextualized that within the space of a gray extraterrestrial. I think because I had it before I knew what any of those things were, I never even associated the two until I read, 2 decades later, the Edith Fiore book, or, 18 years later, the Edith Fiore book. And she's saying, if you ever had an experience when there was something in your room and it like triggers this, wow, what was that? The little man story. So I think, so I can't answer your question perhaps the precise way I'd like to be able to give you the answer, but I think people's experience with gray extraterrestrials today are based upon cultural expectations. That doesn't mean they're not having an experience. It just means that we've been so culturally programmed through a range of things, including UFO documentaries and UFO books, but even popular movies, whether it's Close Encounters or, the X-Files or, E.T. or, Fire in the Sky. There's hundreds of them we've been so culturally programmed now that I do think, and this is even me throwing out, even weirder and wackier kind of hypotheses. I think that whatever it is, whatever we encounter, I think it's reflecting in some capacity, and I'm not the first person to say there's plenty of people who've thought about this far more than me, like John Keel and Jacques Vallée. Greg Bishop wrote a great piece on this about co-creation theory. All kinds of people have talked about this, but I think what's happening, and this is again hypothesis. I wouldn't bet my house on this or anything, but it's my suspicion is what's happening is when we encounter the other, whatever the other is, we're bringing along with us all of these expectations of what a paranormal or an extraterrestrial or a cryptid experience is. And I think that I do think that there's an intelligence separate to us, which is somehow latching onto that or bouncing it back to us, or it could be that it's chameleonic and we're just seeing what, we're just seeing what we expect to see, or it could be that it's intentionally projecting it back to us, or it could be that it's all somehow externalized, dreams and nightmares and expectations of our own. We could be manifesting this stuff. But I do, whatever it is, I think that you can't look at the paranormal, and you particularly can't look at the UFO phenomenon, which is more my wheelhouse than other paranormal things. It's difficult to look at it objectively. Not that maybe we can't look at any of this stuff objectively, but it's different. It's difficult to look at this through a clear lens without acknowledging that there are cultural and historical filters. Like what people were seeing in the 1950s when it came to aliens was very different to what people are seeing, in the post, Communion, Whitley Strieber's book and Bud Hopkins' book and all the documentaries and everything based on that in the 1990s or in the 1980s. The things people were seeing were very different. And if you rewind, you can even go back to the 1890s in America, where people occasionally claimed the great airship was flying across America supposedly, and some people thought it was inventors and some people thought it was alien. People were bringing their cultural expectations to that phenomenon as well. And so whatever the reality of the phenomenon is, and again, it might just be us exteriorizing something, or it might be there's something out there that acts as a mirror, or it might be that there's something out there that cleverly is aware of what we think and then changes its shape to present what's most palatable to us at the time. But you can't, all of this stuff is culturally bound. Whatever interpretation you want to use, the one thing you can't say is this isn't culturally bound, because it's clearly culturally bound. Clearly.
Yeah.
And kind of showing you what they want you to see, maybe.
Quite possibly, or what they think we want to see, and it could be, but the way the mechanism works, I'm not sure, but there's some kind of mechanism. And you see it even in the cryptid space. You see it in that it's not that there's no dogman or werewolf stories prior to the Beast of Bray Road and prior to a similar kind of flap in Michigan, but there wasn't it wasn't reported like it is today. Like I remember talking to Kim, because I was kind of working on a book, which I still haven't finished, about some of this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, well, I'll talk to the people I know who know this stuff. And I remember asking Ken Gerhard, because I kind of already knew the answer, do you really think this dogman stuff was even a thing prior to Linda Godfrey, the late great Linda Godfrey's book? He's like, no, there was hardly any. There was some, but it was. Now people see dogman as often as they see Bigfoot almost. How did that happen? And now some people, I've talked to some people, go, well, people were too scared to report their dogman sightings until it became popular. Maybe that's the case, but it still seems to me to be somehow culturally, dependent upon what people are reporting, what people are seeing. I'm not doubting people are having these experiences. I just think that you can't, you have to look at the historical, you have to look at it through an historical lens.
Sure, absolutely. I get that. And plus, you got to think back in, like you said, you were raised in the 70s and 80s. I was too. You didn't hear anything about Dogman. However, maybe they did see it, but it sounds so far-fetched. Who would believe you, especially at that time,
Right. I mean, even Bigfoot to a weirder degree. I'm as I think you mentioned, I'm making a documentary on Ray Palmer at the moment, and Ray Palmer was the founder of Fate magazine, which is still a magazine which exists today. It's the oldest paranormal newsstand magazine in the space. And when I bought a collection, because he left I think he found it in 48 with Curtis Fuller, and he left in the mid-50s. So I bought the entire Palmer run when he was, for the documentary, I wanted to look at it all. So I bought every Fate issue for the period Palmer was running it for, and a little bit later. And you know what I was very conscious of, and it's so weird now, if there was a general paranormal, ufological monster magazine today, can you imagine there being like several years of it without a Bigfoot on the cover?
Right.
Yeah.
There was one issue with a Yeti on the one Yeti story with 2 or 3 other monster weird things on it. So even Bigfoot is such a modern phenomenon. Now people will say, well, you know, it was big in Native American culture, and before we had the term Bigfoot, we talked about, you know, wild man. Yeah, sure, but people weren't seeing them in the suburbs of, like, I have a friend, I lived there for a little while outside of Cleveland, the suburbs of Cleveland. Guy down the road from him was seeing Bigfoot. Is there a Bigfoot population in the suburbs of Cleveland? I talked to another guy there I know very well who saw Bigfoot in the suburbs of Cleveland when he was a kid. Now, there's no way on earth that Bigfoot is living in the suburbs of Cleveland. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't doubt those people had an experience. But whatever they were experiencing wasn't a flesh and blood ape who just happened to be creeping around the suburbs of Cleveland. It's a ludicrous concept. So I think that the awareness of Bigfoot has increased. And there's probably multiple things going on. There probably are just sometimes people misidentifying a bear or something because they're aware of Bigfoot. But I think it's deeper and weirder than that. I think there's something appearing to people that presents as a Bigfoot, but it's not really a hairy hominid or an undiscovered, you know, North American ape. It's something which is presenting as that. There was a Bigfoot. Now, admittedly, I live in rural Wisconsin, but there was a Bigfoot sighting in one of Linda Godfrey's books, literally down the road from me. Now, I live more rurally, but I don't think there's a sustainable population of Bigfoot around here. I just don't. There's farms, there's forests. You know, when you look at the Pacific Northwest, you can go, well, maybe, right? Like there's tracks of, but Bigfoot's seen in every state in this union. There's no way on earth there's hairy hominids living in every state of this union. There just isn't. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but there's no conceivable way that there's real physical. Now, maybe if you take a woo, as they say, approach, and these things can come in and out of this reality, maybe they are. But there's no way there's just like an undiscovered gorilla living in the suburbs of Cleveland. That's a ludicrous. Anybody who tries to present that is just fooling themselves. Now, but do I think these people had experiences? Yes, I do. I think they did have experiences. One guy I talked to was Sipperson, and I know him. But I guarantee it wasn't some hairy hominid. It was something else, you know, presenting as a hairy hominid.
Well, Paul and I, we live, I was going to say, Paul and I live in the St. Louis area, and St. Louis has the Arch, and supposedly there was a dogman sighting downtown at the Arch, and it's a very populated area. You know, it's crazy.
And
I don't believe flesh and blood either. You know, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean that leads me to believe that there's going through some kind of portal, at least down there by the Arch. I mean, there's always something going on down there. I mean, it was north of the Arch, which is not really the safest place to be. I guess if you're a dogman, I guess you'd be fine. But I mean, it's hard to believe that something would actually physically be wandering around there. And I was just watching a show today. They were talking about a dogman encounter in New Mexico, Rio Rancho, New Mexico, in somebody's backyard, and it was a highly populated area. I mean, how does that go undetected?
Yeah. And incidentally, how we live in America, there's a Second Amendment, God bless America. I find it unfathomable if any of these things are flesh and blood, that somebody hasn't just shot one, driven to the steps of CNN or Fox News and just throwing the thing out of the back of the pickup and say, see, here's one. Like, and the thing is, if you read the literature, particularly I think the literature before there was as much control of what the popular interpretations are. So if you read some of the stuff from people like Jerome Clark and Lauren Coleman back before they were, well, Jerome Clark's a UFO guy, but they wrote books together, and obviously Lauren Coleman's, you know, Mr. Cryptozoology now. They were saying these things are some all of this, UFOs, Dogman, well, I didn't say Dogman, and Bigfoot, all these weird creatures are manifestations from the same central source. And they have case after case, as does Stan Gordon, as does anybody else when you pay attention, of people shooting Bigfoot and them evaporating in a puff of smoke, or people shooting Bigfoot and them just swatting the bullets like they're flies. There's story after story after story of people shooting Bigfoot and nothing happening. So I think people have shot Bigfoot. I think nothing's happened. And because otherwise, again, every time I'm out my back 40 here, I've got a gun on me. You know what I mean? Just because you don't go into the woods here if you don't have a firearm. You just got to be crazy, right? Even the local sheriff's department, when they came here once, because I had a problem with wild dog, old neighbor's dogs killing my chickens, they're like, well, why don't you have a gun on your belt when you're going out feeding your chickens? You should never not have a gun on your belt in this part of so that's the American way, and I'm quite happy that it's the American way. But you can't tell me all these people are seeing thousands of Bigfoot and Dogmen and nobody's dropped one yet. Obviously, it would have happened not just once. If all of these reports are physical flesh and blood creatures, all of them, and there's so many of them, there's no way there haven't been 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 shot by now. Not just one, again and again and again and again. And where's the body? So often people go, if you go, where's the Bigfoot body? Well, when they fall out when you're out in the woods and a Bigfoot dies, you don't often see, bodies of other animals either. Various predators take the bones and it decomposes. Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, why don't we have one that somebody's just shot when it's been prowling around their apple orchard? So I think, again, people are having experiences. I just don't think it's flesh and blood. I just don't think it's a hominid. Or it comes and goes from here, and so it somehow can just zap out of this reality. I mean, that's possible, I guess.
Absolutely, it is. I believe that the 3-letter agencies, I believe they have some. I believe they are holding the Bigfoot and the Dogmen, and they know exactly what they are. Same thing as, like we did with the aliens, I definitely believe that.
Ultimate fighting weapon there,
yeah. I mean, I've heard of people talk about that Dogman was a super soldier and they fought in Vietnam. I don't know how true that is. It's things I've heard and I've read about, but I find that interesting.
I've heard that theory too. I think even Linda Godfrey posited that in one of her later books, that there was somehow some kind of biological. I don't know. I mean, I always kind of step back from any super physical interpretation. And again, I don't know. It's just the way that my mind or my feelings work. So I tend to always go, and you know what? You might be right. The government might know everything. And God, Lord knows they wouldn't tell us if they did, right? Like I agree with you there. If they knew, they wouldn't tell us. But at the same time, I often wonder if they don't know anything. And let's just stay on UFOs, which is my wheelhouse. There's all this expectation these days. Oh, we need to have disclosure, and there's all these congressional hearings, and there's all of this kind of stuff. But I wonder if they don't know anything. I wonder if it's more dangerous for them to be like to come out and go, well, we know there's something and we have no idea what it is, but there's weird stuff happening and people are being taken and there's aliens in backyards and there's aircraft, which seem to be aircraft that we can't. I wonder if that isn't scarier to most people than, because when people in the UFO community demand disclosure, what they're really saying is, I want you, the US government, to tell me that the X-Files is true, essentially. I want you to tell me that you have a crash saucer in Roswell, that you know the aliens, that people are being abducted, that everything I believe for the last 10, 20, 30 years is true. But the weird thing is, the UFO community has a rightfully so, perhaps hostile relationship with the UFO, with the US government since the 1950s. So why they think now a government that they haven't trusted in 70 years is going, almost 80 actually, is going to all of a sudden give them the truth. I would be, if I was in the UFO community, I'm really not, and the government told me something, I'd be like, well, I didn't believe you for 80 years. Why am I going to believe what you're telling me now? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I suspect, to me, what I think the reality, if there is a UFO reality, I think a lot of the things that come out, like the Tic Tac video, are just our own technology, and they tested them on. Where wouldn't you test? If you had high-end technology, you test it on your own pilots on a test run, right? You go, let's fly this. There's a naval test, thing going on. There's a naval war games. Let's go and test the new ultra super secret drone we've got there and see what happens. See what they do, right? The worst they're going to do is shoot it down if they can. That's what I think is what most of that stuff is. I think the other weirder stuff, people having visitations by, you know, things at the end of their bed, or, you know, driving along a dark road and all of a sudden they see a landed saucer and there's little creatures around, all those super weird stories. I don't think the government has any idea. I don't think they know any of this. I really don't. I could be wrong. This is all just opinion, but.
And quite honestly, if the government would come out now and say that they have alien craft or whatever that they're working on, you know, there's so much corruption. Who would actually believe them?
Right.
I have a hard time believing them in the first place. But
what are your? Oh, sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No, go on, Krista, because I lost what I was going to say.
Sorry, didn't mean to make you lose.
No, you're good. No, you're good. I lost it beforehand.
What are your thoughts on, you know, they say like Eisenhower met with the aliens, you know, back in 1954 or something like that, and supposedly even the actor Jackie Gleason did. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that stuff's fascinating. I mean, I don't know if I believe whether Eisenhower met. I do think there was. I'll answer your question in a roundabout way. There was possibly a genuine disinformation campaign for a very long time, and Lord knows the reason for it. But I certainly know that there were people within the U.S. Air Force who were promising certain filmmakers, for different people too, like from Linda Moulton Howe, you know, later on, all the way back to what's the documentarian filmmaker in the 70s. Anyway, there's a number of them that they promised they would give them the secrets to, and then they yanked it away at the last minute. I think when people in the UFO community look at that, they can probably believe one or two things. One is, well, they have the secrets and they didn't release them. Or two might be, well, they're doing some kind of spin to obfuscate the real UFO truth, you know, that they're trying to point us in a different direction. Like Stephen Greer might say something like that, for example. But I wonder if some of that spin, and other people have suggested this, people like Greg Bishop, I think, have suggested this. I wonder if some of this spin isn't things we don't even understand why the spin's being done. Like it mightn't even be aimed at the UFO community. It might be aimed at foreign actors. It might be, well, if we start spinning this story that we have this advanced technology, then it might make the Chinese or the Soviets back in the day or somebody else second guess what we're actually doing on this airbase. Or it might be because they're doing malfeasance of like a non-extraterrestrial kind, hideous things on that base, things they shouldn't be testing. So they start to spin these stories about Area 51. You know what I mean? That is down source technology, because it confuses everybody. It might even be less weird than that. It might be that, well, we are testing real technology, breakthrough technology here. So this guy's saying it's UFO technology over here, so let's just let that story spin, and then it will confuse all the people spying on the base, and it will confuse the messages gotten out. We have advanced technology, and the Soviets won't know what's going on, and the Chinese won't know what's going on, and Congress, who we should be answering to, won't know what's going on. So it mightn't be even aimed at the UFO community. That said, we do know sometimes that the UFO community have at least been a conduit for the disinformation. In 1989, at the MUFON symposium, the major MUFON meeting, arguably America's most important ufologist in the 80s was William Moore. William Moore co-wrote and he probably did most of the work. He co-wrote the first book on Roswell. He's the person who really breaks the Roswell story, with Charles Berlitz and Stanton Friedman, another prominent ufologist, had done most of the research on that. William Moore, with his film TV producing friend Jamie Shandera, also the people who received the original MJ-12 documents. William Moore is also involved in something called the Benowitz Affair, which is a ridiculously long story, which some people might be aware of who are listeners, and some mightn't be. If you're interested in perhaps the greatest UFO psyop of all time, you should read Greg Bishop's book, Project Beta, which is about the Paul Benowitz affair. But anyway, so William Moore is at the heart of, essentially with a few other people, of creating most of what became X-Files UFO belief, which is what I call it. saucer crashes in Roswell. There's a secret US government within inside the government, MJ12, which starts back engineering this technology. All of that stuff comes through William Moore, essentially, and a few other people, but primarily William Moore. William Moore gets up in front of the symposium. He's America's main ufologist at the time, arguably the most important ufologist in the country. Gets up in front of the MUFON annual symposium and says, okay, I admit, I was an AFOSI, an Air Force intelligence asset. We were feeding you disinformation, and I was, gathering information and giving it back to the Air Force. This is the man who literally introduced all of these things which are X-Files mythology, introduced these things into the general consciousness, right? This is a man saying he was an Air Force asset. And we know, too, I'm talking with back in the day, Richard Doty, who was the AFOSI agent, like the Air Force intelligence operative, who was the handler of William Moore. And he promulgated a lot of this stuff as well. And Doty is also involved in the Serpo story, which is essentially the Close Encounters of the Third Kind story about people being taken off world in exchange for other ETs left behind. Doty's at the heart of the idea that that there was an alien kept in Area 51 who liked, strawberry ice cream and Tibetan, music, all of these things. And this is a small cadre of people who promulgated all of this stuff, which became UFO reality. And most of it we know now was Air Force spin. So take that as you will. The funny thing is the UFO community didn't go, we've been fooled. Thank you for telling us, William Moore. They just got furious at William Moore and furious at Richard Doty, and they still hate Richard Doty and do letters. These are people who came out and said, yeah, that's what we did.
They hate him for telling the truth.
And the thing is, Richard Doty, and I personally, I really like Richard Doty. Like, he was super nice to me. He was a great guest. I've communicated with him a bunch. But Richard Doty's still out there on, Stephen Greer documentaries, and will still say, oh, no, some of this was true. I did see the ET, an area. So he's still, and my suspicion is, I don't want to say Richard Doty's a liar, because again, I like him, but my suspicion is he's probably still doing his job, even though he doesn't work for the AFOSI anymore. He's still telling these stories. But the fact we know it now, and people still believe there was a bloody downed UFO in Roswell, right? That's a core part of UFO belief. People still believe that there's something called MJ12. Still believe this. This is anybody who's paid any attention knows this is all nonsense now, right? And it's horrible to say that, and people in the UFO community get really upset with it. But I'm not the one who's telling you this. It's been told by the people who were. Put it this way: the people who gave you that story have come forward and said, we were Air Force. We were Air Force intelligence agents, or we were operatives for the Air Force intelligence services. So why would you believe any of this stuff?
Yeah.
Could they just be saying that to kind of throw the American public off the scent?
Yeah, sure, conceivably.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, whether or not whatever they're doing in Area 51, whatever Air Force base and that is in Ohio, where they allegedly took these aircrafts and they're possibly Wright-Patterson. I mean, it would explain a whole lot if that is the case. I mean, the technology that they have that's coming out, these new spy planes, undetectable by radar, stuff like that. I mean, to me, that would make a lot of sense. Not saying that these scientists and engineers aren't brilliant at what they do, but how did this technology come to be relatively quickly?
Well, I guess if there's billions of dollars of your tax dollars pumped into secret projects, you know what I mean? Like, the Wright brothers could get heavier than an aircraft with a few bucks. And that was, before it had been done.
Yeah.
But post that, you give billions and billions of dollars that go into this black hole of, I don't know. And so I think, listen, could there have been some extraterrestrial crash and some recovery? Sure, there could have been. But the people who made it popular were clearly not. So they could have lied afterwards. Like, maybe it's a pretty complicated game, though. Like, if the people who popularized it come forward later and say we're the bad guy, right? It seems to me that the more reasonable explanation is that for whatever reason, some of these stories were being pushed out, and maybe it's disinfo. Like, disinfo can sometimes have some truth, so maybe there was some truth to that. I don't know, but I do know that nobody wants to admit that the thing they believe for a very long time is true. So when William Moore came out and said that, you had an incredible level of cognitive dissonance. You had people doubling down on their belief system. Instead of going, well, maybe let's reconsider everything William Moore's ever said to us, like MJ12, Roswell, all this stuff. Let's reconsider all of that, right? No, they didn't. They just got, like, it got stronger. Like, this is before the X-Files. You know what I mean? This is before all of this stuff became culturally mainstream. In 89, I mean, Roswell was gradually being known, but it wasn't. The Roswell television movie hadn't been made with Kyle MacLachlan and Martin Sheen at that time. The X-Files hadn't been made at that time. Men in Black hadn't been made. All of these things that really popularized it outside of, the kind of the fringes of ufology. So if anything, after Moore's admission that he was, an operative, it didn't stop ufology from stepping back. They just doubled down. It got more paranoid after William Moore. That's when you get that's when it literally becomes the X-Files. It literally becomes, the government are after us, and this is all this crazy big black dark conspiracy. Which I'm sure works, by the way, for bases like Area 51. Let's just tell them we're testing down flying saucers instead of tell them that, we've been working on this, advanced, fighter jet for, the last 20 years or whatever.
Yeah. And, without all this stuff, we don't have, War of the Worlds. We don't have Star Wars, Star Trek, all this fun stuff. And I mean, hell, we wouldn't have this conversation right now.
Yeah. And again, I could be wrong. Maybe something went down in Roswell. I don't think so, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? I mean, like we said, are we ever going to know? I highly doubt it.
Why do you think Roswell's so secretive then?
Well, I don't think at first it was ridiculous. Well, I'll tell. There is a reason it was a little secretive. There's a number of books called UFO Crash at Roswell or something similar, but there's a book that came out in the late 90s by, I think they were primarily academics writing. I think maybe one was a sociologist and one might have been like an anthropologist or a historian or something. And the other person was somebody who'd worked on a high altitude test balloon system in Roswell. And the book's very convincing about what actually happened at Roswell. I think it's Sailor Ziegler and somebody else. I've got it over. I could go pull it out of my shelf, but I won't jump up and do it. But essentially, part of the book looks at the kind of social, growth of this story of Roswell. But the most fascinating part of the book is the book written by the person who worked for the high altitude testing balloon, and they were testing like radiation in high levels of, the stratosphere. I'm not a scientist, the stratosphere or whatever, to see if the Soviets were doing nuclear tests, essentially, and to see what was going on up there. And one of the balloons went off course, and they lost it. And the scientist who'd worked for that organization back in 1947 said, "We're almost certain that the Roswell recovery was our balloon." And apparently it was very similar. It was made of a different kind of material that, yes, you would crunch it up and then it would flatten out. They used a type of tape which had weird symbols on it, which were vaguely look like hieroglyphics or something, even though they weren't. There was kind of a light balsa material that wasn't balsa. And he was like, it fits all the patterns of everything that we did. And that's almost certainly, because don't forget too, even though the original story that went out on the Newswire, and I met Walter Holt back in the day as well when I was doing my dissertation, the guy who wrote that press release. And by the way, they all still perpetuated the Roswell story when I was in Roswell. But the guy who worked for the Army Air Force, because then the services were combined, who wrote the press release, they didn't say that although it was, U.S. Army Air Force captures down saucer. What they really found was a field of weird metallic debris, like shiny light debris. They never actually said they pulled out of the ground a disc-shaped craft. And the next day they kind of wound it back. I think maybe because, and this might answer your question to a degree, Krista, maybe the secrecy was, we're kind of in a trouble now because we've announced this thing, we found this weird thing, we've said it's a flying saucer. It's not a flying saucer. It's kind of a balloon, but it's not a balloon. Right. We're actually testing like nuclear radiation in the stratosphere. So they go, oh, it's just a weather balloon. So I think there might have been some secrecy. And don't forget too, then the Americans believed back then, like America just took that story. Roswell wasn't talked about from the day after the crash when the Army Air Force retracted that initial press release. It wasn't talked about until the late 70s, early 80s when William Moore, who I mentioned before, and Stanton Friedman and those guys started, supposedly investigating and building the story again. So that I mean, it could be as simple an explanation as that. And then later, if you're an intelligence officer later and you're going, well, we want to cover what we're doing, there's that old damn Roswell story, right? Why don't we say we got a saucer then and we're back engineering it, we're flying it out of Area 51, right? Like you can see how when you're playing these kind of mind games that you can I don't know. I mean, again, I'm entirely wrong. This is just my
opinion.
quasi-educated guess. So
my thought on that is, even with Roswell and before that Cape Girardeau, maybe it was true. Maybe it was a saucer that landed, and at that time, the 40s or 50s, maybe the American public wasn't ready for that. Maybe they wouldn't be able to accept it, or there'd be some kind of huge upheaval. I don't know, whatever. And up until the 70s or 80s, us as a society were more acceptable to this information. I mean, and then, the government goes in and says, well, we have a craft. Oh, wait, no, I don't think these people, the society is going to accept this. They're going to freak out about it. Let's just say it's a weather balloon. And then they backtrack, and then, they're not going to keep going back and forth on this. Maybe. That's just my theory.
Maybe. I mean, again, I don't actually know. I wasn't on the inside. I'm just trying to work out. Don't forget too, though, when Roswell happens in early July of 1947, supposedly, and when Mac Brazel carries the stuff back into Roswell, the ranch, who finds the stuff on his back, not his back 40, probably his back 400 or wherever, this massive acreage he has. It was what's called the Summer of the Saucers now. Kenneth Arnold had his famous sighting of 9 crescent-shaped craft, which became flying saucer-shaped through a number of ways, which would take another half an hour to explain. But for whatever reason, flying saucers had captured the attention of the papers and the press across the world in the summer of 47. So when Mac Brazel finds something on his ranch which is silver and weird and scattered material, he's reading that there's, rewards for flying saucers. So what's his, what I mean? Like, again, this is what I'm talking about, cultural expectations, when all over the newspapers are flying saucers, flying saucers, flying saucers. And 2 weeks later, you're a rancher on your back 40 and you're like, oh, you're back 400 or whatever. And you're like, oh, all this metallic stuff all over my paddock. That must be one of them dang flying saucers. I'm taking that into town. And then when he takes it into town, the military probably weren't happy. The people who were involved with, they were like, bloody hell, he found that, they talked to some intelligence officer probably, he found that damn thing which we don't want the Soviets to know that we're testing.
That's another thing. I mean, yeah exactly. Wow, interesting stuff. It
is.
Tell us a little bit about the Shaver movie, the Shaver mystery. I'm sorry, your documentary.
Well, that's my passion at the moment. So, I was fortunate enough to be invited to screen the Shaver mystery at Crossing Realms, where you guys, which you guys organize. The Shaver mystery is a 14-minute short film, kind of extracted from my still in progress feature documentary, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, which all ties back into the stories we're talking about now. Yeah. So the Shaver mystery, what the Shaver mystery was, not what my film is, although my film looks at it. The Shaver mystery was a series of science fiction stories which appeared in Amazing Stories, which was America's leading science fiction pulp magazine in the mid-1940s, written by Richard Shaver, and some say ghost written by Raymond Palmer, who was the editor of Amazing Stories and who later became the editor of Fate magazine and later went on to be the editor of and the owner of America's only newsstand UFO magazine for some period called Flying Saucers. So this person, all of this ties into the type of cultural, realities we're talking about. So the Shaver mystery was basically a series of science fiction stories which talked about an ancient past where there were there was a spacefaring cult. And before I go further, I will say that these were sold in Amazing Stories, not as science fiction, which it was, but as science fact. It was sold as something which had actually happened. Richard Shaver, the author, said he knew this by having his own experiences, including being abducted by alien-type beings who didn't live in space, but lived underneath the Earth's surface, which already started to prep the idea of alien abduction later. And this was a very, very popular back in the day story. It was even Life magazine talked about it. Harper's magazine talked about it. Very critical of it, of course. But basically the story was that in prehistory, in pre-diluvial times before the flood, there was a race on Earth. They were called the Atlans or the Titans. And they lived for very long periods of time. In fact, they lived so long that they would become giants because they would keep growing as they lived. And they realized that rays from our sun or radiation from our sun was poisoning them and poisoning this Earth, and it was going to kill them or shorten their lifespan. So they made an extensive cavern world beneath the planet, taking advantage in sometimes of caves that were already there and other things, but they built this incredible underground civilization. They moved into these caverns, but even under there they realized the sun's poisons were still coming through. So they started a max exodus off planet. They were a spacefaring civilization. They had things like flying saucers before flying saucers were talked about, at least in Richard Shaver's stories. And they fled the planet. They left behind a great number of people, which Richard Shaver called the Abandoned-ero. Again, he's the person who wrote the Shaver mystery stories. And the Abandoned-ero were essentially three different types of people. One of them, the most evil and the most malicious, were just the Dero. And in Shaver's alphabet and Shaver's language, Dero meant detrimental robot. And he didn't mean they were mechanical robots. Robot in his language meant you were driven by one idea, and which was Ro, and D, so Dero. D was detrimental. So they were detrimental robots, which meant all they wanted to do was hurt people, rape, pillage, kill, murder, cannibalize. They were one of the groups that were left behind, or that's what they devolved into. Another group were called the Tero, and T in Shaver's language stood for integrative, which meant they were nice and they were helpful. They were they were always fighting they were always on the back foot. There were more Deros, so they were always trying to battle against the Dero, but they were never quite winning. And on the surface, the other people remained. These people had gone into the caverns that were essentially became humanity. So in the Shaver mystery, there was still going on underneath the Earth this incredible battle between the Dero and the Tero, with us often on the surface being interfered with, being abducted, being taken as slaves, and the people beneath the surface had objects which were very much like flying saucers. They could move in all kinds of zigzaggy ways. They would come up. Sometimes there would be the space people who would come back and pillage the caverns. There were aliens coming. There were aliens going. They included the ideas of Charles Fort, who had suggested, at the beginning of the 20th century or earlier on in the 20th century, that this Earth was probably owned by other people and people or other species, and we were being abducted and we belonged to them. And this became like a cultural phenomenon just before the era of flying saucers erupted. So when Kenneth Arnold, who I mentioned before, had the first flying saucer report in June of 1947, on the newsstands at the time, the June 1947 issue of Amazing Stories was the all Shaver mystery issue. The entire issue was nothing but stories from Richard Shaver and people writing articles about the reality of the Shaver mystery. And one of those articles was written by the great Fortean of the time, or one of the great Forteans of the time, whose name was Vincent Gaddis. And Vincent Gaddis's piece was called Visitors from the Void. And the piece essentially talked about flying saucers but it was written just before we had that nomenclature to call flying saucers, but it was talking about vehicles from elsewhere visiting this planet. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that was America's top-selling science fiction pulp magazine. One of America's top-selling pulp magazines was on newsstands when Kenneth Arnold had his sighting. So they think millions of Americans were already conscious of the Shaver mystery. Millions of Americans already thought essentially what people who believe in UFOs today thought. And when Kenneth Arnold, has his experiences, there's a whole group of people, regular readers of this magazine and people who've heard about it, who know instantly, who contextualize this instantly, including Ray Palmer, Richard Shaver, who straight away said, this is what we've been talking about for the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. This is proof of everything we've been talking about. And then so after that, Palmer goes on to do Fate magazine, Flying Saucers magazine. So much of what we believe, John Keel said Ray Palmer was the man who invented flying saucers. He said Richard Shaver was the father of ufology. So these two men who started within the science fiction realm saying the stories were true, essentially laid the groundwork for things we still believe today. So you can't really talk about ufology without really, or about UFOs today, without understanding what these people were talking about in the mid-1940s, because it laid the groundwork for what came afterwards.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know what I find so...
Yeah,
no kidding. I mean, you know what I find so interesting about you is that this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this all stemmed from that one night in Australia.
The little man.
The little man.
Yeah, that's absolutely why I did my academic work later, because of that.
And I just think that is so amazing that you've devoted pretty much your life to this. And that's incredible. And I mean, not many people from 18, I don't know how old you are, but 18 until, hell, I have trouble doing something for 2 years. All these years that it's amazing that you stuck with us and devoted so much and learned so much and are bringing so much information to the table to help educate so many people.
Yeah.
Well,
that's nice of you to say, Paul. It might just be because I'm crazy as well.
I mean, that kind of helps too, but but yeah, that's to me, that's just incredible. That's incredible. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast, Talking Weird. It's a fantastic show, and where that all came about, and
well, that's nice of you to that's nice of you to say it's a fantastic show. It really, it's funny because I started it not that long before the COVID pandemic became a thing. And then everybody was doing a podcast. So I'm like, dag nabbit. I'm like, I'll do this. And don't get me wrong, there was already lots of people in the space doing paranormal podcasts. But I think it started in January. The pandemic kind of kicked off in hardcore into March. And I think I just started in December or January before. And all of a sudden the space was just filled with this stuff. And I mean, Talking Weird is probably what it is. It just gives me an excuse to talk about strange things, with I'm tempted though, and I haven't said this anywhere before. It was a suggestion my girlfriend Sam, who I think you both met. She was like, "You're so into Shaver and Palmer. You should just do a Shaver and Palmer show." And I'm like, maybe I need to start doing Talking Weird one week and Talking Shaver the next week or something. It's just
there you go.
I mean, it wouldn't be called Talking Shaver, but I don't want to do any more shows, but moving the show, because I talked a little bit about the Shaver mystery today and a little bit about Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, but you could do a show literally just talking about those guys and the things related to a good friend of mine, Richard Toronto, who if anybody is listening to this and is going like, this Shaver stuff sounds really weird. Richard Toronto, who knew Richard Shaver towards the end of his life, ran a kind of a fanzine, as they would have called them back in the day, or like a zine, as they would have called them back in the day, just called Shavertron, about Richard Shaver and about Ray Palmer and about things related to the mystery, everything from UFOs to weird underground realities. And then later on, he wrote the major biography of Palmer and Shaver. There's other ones as well, but his is my favorite, called War Over Lemuria. And it's just about Richard Shaver rather, and Ray Palmer, and about how all of this stuff came to being. And he has a number of other books. He has a book called Shaverology, which is a companion piece. He has books about Richard Shaver's rock artwork, which is another story you could do a whole show on. But yeah, if anybody's interested, they should go to Amazon and get Richard Toronto's War Over Lemuria, because it covers the stuff I touched on briefly in fantastic detail, and it's just an absolutely fascinating book. And that kind of makes me go, well, maybe I could do that with a show. Maybe I could do like Shavertron today, like still have something just dedicated to the Shaver mystery. Maybe it might be in my future.
There you go.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, a lot of good stuff, man. I'm absorbing, there's so much information, and I'm not real knowledgeable in the UFO side, so I thoroughly have enjoyed this.
I think it's really interesting, and that's something that I want to learn a lot more on. And I've done a little bit on Roswell, a little bit on Cape Girardeau, a little bit on Area 51, whatever it is we can find out about it. But I just find it extremely interesting. And are they here already? Where are they from? Are they us from the past? I mean, from the future, or are they from a completely different world? I mean, who really knows?
Yeah.
Well,
and the thing is,
no, you go, Krista.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, the thing is too, people don't think to look up, and once I started looking up, the things I would see is just pretty amazing.
The heavens are filled with all kinds of strangeness. I was just going to say that Congressman Tim Burchett recently was talking about how now they know there are these deep sea alien, bases beneath the waters. Richard Shaver was saying that like way back in the day, decades and decades. He believed in the sea people as well, who had all this advanced technology. To him, the sources came out of the waters and they came out of the caverns. So it's funny to see now that key disclosure people are talking about, well, maybe they're actually here among us. Well, whether he was right or wrong, Richard Shaver and Ray Palmer were both saying the same thing as early as the mid-1940s. So the more we evolve, perhaps the more we're in the same space. Yeah.
Sure.
Right. And you know what? It just makes sense if they're hiding in the oceans. I mean, there's so much space down there that we haven't explored. And I mean, I don't know how we can get all the way down there and stuff. And that just makes sense to me that they're a good place to hide for them. So. I mean, who knows?
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, this has been a fantastic show. I appreciate you coming on here tonight.
Well, thanks for listening to me rant about Richard Shaver, Ray Palmer, UFO reality, and the little man who took me away.
And again, I just find it amazing and fascinating that has stuck with you your entire life, and you've done so much with that. And it's led down so many paths for you, and it's pretty cool. It's really cool.
Well, it's cool you guys do this show, and it's cool. I hope you guys are going to do another con next year, by the way, because that was awesome.
We're kind of talking.
That's one thing we haven't. Yeah, we haven't really had much conversation about it, but
still trying to recoup from the first one.
Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely fun meeting everybody, like we said, and hearing all the presentations. Unfortunately, on Saturday, I didn't get to hear too many presentations and stuff, but certainly got to meet a lot of people. So,
yep, absolutely,
that was fun. So, well, all right, and when is Talking Weird on?
Talking Weird is Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Central. And this week is the Halloween special I do every year. We have Eric Mintel on for the Halloween special this year, who is a great guest. And I'll be in fancy dress. I can't promise whether Eric will be or not. That's up to him. But it's going to be, we'll be talking about Eric's extensive investigations into everything from Dogman to Bigfoot to spooks and sprites. So I'll try to make it a fun, spooky Halloween. It's All Hallows Eve, really, as we go on. So please, and we're live, so please come and join us. It'll be fun. And on the Untold Radio Network as well.
Can you kind of give us a hint what you might be dressing up as Thursday night?
I will give you a hint. The hint is the costume arrived today while I was, as I said, at my daughter's homeschool group with her today. And when I came back, I found it, and I didn't let her know, and I dressed in it, and then I went outside and I banged on the windows and the door to try to give her a fright, but it didn't work. But we live in the woods, so that might give you a suggestion.
All right. Okay, we're gonna here's the link. It's in chat. Go ahead and Thursday night, tomorrow night at 9:00 Central. Tune in to Talking Weird and see what his costume is. I'm interested.
It's going to be fun.
I am too.
Every Halloween, I've been doing it for years now. So
yeah,
isn't it kind of funny that, you know, I always thought it was as a kid thing to dress up as something for Halloween, and then we're still doing it. I mean, well into our 50s, we're still doing it, dressing up as something for Halloween.
I think that's one of the great joys of life is maintaining your inner child and entertaining them by still dressing up, still having fun. I think people in this space do maintain that sense of the imaginal more than people who don't. Like, there is, whatever it is, I don't even know. Like, I have my theories, but if you can maintain this kind of, you know, this interest in the weird and the strange, and that's kind of like dressing up all the time. It's like, you know, still accessing that part of you which is interested in things which aren't the normal. Right. And I think we're all richer for it. Whatever we believe, we're all richer for it, I think.
Right. I completely agree with that. With that. Yeah. So, all right, guys. Once again, Dr. Dean Bertram, thank you so much for joining us tonight, spending your Wednesday night with us. It's been fascinating. I know the people in chat have really enjoyed this. A lot of great conversations going on over there as well. So I do appreciate you coming on and spending your Wednesday with us.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Krista. I hope you both have a very happy Halloween, and I hope you both keep it weird.
We will keep it weird and keep it safe, too.
Well, I'll be reaching out to you probably at the early part of next year and see if you'll come on Blondes and Booze.
I'd be more than happy to. That'd be fun.
Okay, we appreciate it.
And you know, I forgot to tell my wife that you were on, and forgot to tell you that you're Australian. She loves the accent. So, you know, thank you very much for doing that for her too.
Well, man, say hello to your wife. Say g'day. Say g'day to you. Say g'day for me.
I hope she's watching it now. Real quick before we head on out, thank you, T-Bone. I know you're out watching the baseball game. Hopefully the Blue Jays are beating the Dodgers right now. But thank you for gifting, and then well, thank you, Werewolf. I know he went to bed too, so thank you for that $2 donation. And you know, thank you all for joining us. Like I said, I appreciate you guys being here every single show, and we will see you tomorrow, Krista. We have 4 Blondes, 1 Mystery at 6:30 Central. And then Blondes and Booze tomorrow night. You have Spooky Dookie on tomorrow night, don't you?
No, Spooky Dookie was last week.
I knew that.
We have Paranormal 411.
Oh, those are cool guys.
Yeah, they are nice guys.
Yeah. So, all righty, everybody. Have a happy and safe Halloween. Keep your notifications on. I might drop a little show, some ghost stories and stuff on Halloween night. So, everybody have a great night, and we will see you all tomorrow night.
Good night.
See you guys. Night, everybody.